Welcome to all joining us today. My name is Adele Krach and I am from Food Focus. We are excited to partner with one of our long-standing sponsors, the DSA. The DSA has received a lot of positive feedback from the industry on the value of these webinars, so they decided to provide you with more. So today is the first of 10 webinars that we will be hosting with the DSA. Today's topic, recent developments in the dairy regulatory landscape. The organized dairy industry acknowledges the importance of compliance with the law and related standards, national and international, pertaining to the dairy value chain. The regulatory landscape relating to milk and other dairy products is of multidimensional nature. It involves regulations of product composition, food safety, animal health and welfare, environmental management, animal feed, milking parlours, the transportation of milk, processing plants, storage, and related matters such as export requirements. South Africa is a role player in the international arena, and compliance with national and international legislation and adherence to certain international codes and standards is of the utmost importance. It is therefore essential to be cognizant of the role and functions of the various national authorities and bodies, such as the South African Bureau of Standards, SABS, African Organization for Standardization, International Standards Organization, World Trade Organization, and also the Codex Alimentarius, and more. Safeguarding dairy in the interest of our dairy industry and the SA consumers in addition, unpacking and understanding the concept of sustainability in the dairy industry in the complex dairy value chain brings many challenges. These challenges can only be addressed through shared responsibilities between all industry stakeholders and the representative authorities. Now, to bring us up to speed with the recent developments, I would like to introduce you to Jompie Burger, the Managing Director of the DSA. Welcome this morning, Jompie. We are all looking forward to listen to you. So I'm just quickly going to go through Jompie's CV. Jompie achieved a diploma in public health at the Technikon of Pretoria, practicing as an environmental health practitioner. He furthered his studies and obtained a BTech Environmental Health as well as a BA in Public Administration. During the time of holding the position of Assistant Head of Health Services at the City Council of Springs, he extended his field of expertise to food safety, which included further studies in food safety management systems. After attending his career at the local authority in 1999, he became involved in product development, experienced life as an owner of an artisanal cheese factory, worked as a food safety consultant for various brand names in the food industry, as well as an external food safety auditor in the retail sector. In 2005, he became involved in the organized dairy industry by managing various statutory projects on behalf of the Dairy Standard Agency. He is currently the Managing Director of the DSA, an independent, non-profit organization which primary objective is to promote dairy quality and safety in the interest of the industry and the consumer. He serves on several Milk SA advisory committees and technical committees of organizations such as the SABS and the International Dairy Federation. And with that, I am now very excited to hand over to you, Jompie, for your presentation. Thank you, Jompie.
Right, good. Thank you very much, Adele. It's like a Boeing trying to take off with all the things I had to say already. But thank you very much for this opportunity again. It's always a privilege. I think we work on the principle what we've achieved already last year. trying to share with you dairy technical information as we move on. I think it's critically important that our stakeholders know what we're doing and that we keep you well informed of what's happening in our dairy discipline. So yes, the regulation has always been part and parcel of our makeup, and I think it's important to share with you just what's happening. First of all, you must know the Dairy Standard Agency by now, an industry initiative established by the organized dairy industry. We're a non-profit entity, and we've been established really there to promote the level of compliance with quality, safety. And if I say quality, product compositional issues, food safety, metrology standards of milk and other dairy products in South Africa. That's the core of our business. But obviously, part of the line functions is also to address and do management, project management for Milk SA. And one of them that I would like to talk to you about today is the Regulations and Standards Project of Milk SA, which makes a huge contribution towards the to the regulatory environment as we carry on. So yes, I think what is very important is that we understand in this world that we live in now, that effective regulation is not easy to develop and implement. That is sometimes where that we miss why it takes so long to really get some very important legislation on the table for further discussions and obviously to have it promulgated. The regulator and the regulated must have a clear understanding of the business and technology that is to be regulated. In other words, if we don't know what we need to address in the context of regulation, we will be writing dysfunctional regulations that will have to be up for review very quickly if we don't pay attention to that. So dairy nutrition and compositional issues, for example, when it comes to technical issues, very complex field, and the regulation of that as well. So bottom line is, we don't want regulations that's so complicated that the user of that do not understand how to implement the regulation. So if I talk about the regulation, what is our expectation? An effective regulation system should be sensitive to the needs of the industry and adopting and implementing policies that will reduce regulations. That sounds a bit strange. It's contrary to what we experience. And that is really true. So again, the industry should not find itself in a position where it makes itself guilty of conduct that causes over-regulation. So the regulator heavily rely on the industry to show ethics, because based on that, it will tell the regulator to what level he has to regulate certain issues within the context of, let's say, food safety or whatever the case may be. And that's really important for us. You know, if you look at the drill down of some of the regulations, and a good example most likely would be the Regulation 146, which is now in the draft 3337. Why is that document so complicated? And then you start realizing, but these are little gates that will have to be closed as we move on, because it's opportunities for people that is unscrupulous in their world and opportunists that make it really difficult for the regulator to operate in. That's a disadvantage. Yes, we have to look at the cost issue. So at the end of the day, can you imagine where are we going to end up if we look at Regulation 3337 now? If everything has to be implemented that is in the draft, it's going to cost a lot of money. And I think that is absolutely nonsensical to follow that route, that we allow that our regulations in the broad spectrum is really so difficult to implement or promulgate and implement. So yes, sometimes we do get at crossroads, and specifically in the dairy industry. Simply because we are not only in South Africa dealing with our national regulations, but also we deal with the world out there. And as you would maybe remember from my last presentation, that we are a member of the WTO as a central government body. And for that reason, being a member, there's certain expectations from us. And those substantive provisions will be that the standardizing body, for example, in South Africa, which is the SABS, for example, needs to pay attention of what's happening in the world out there. And to do that is we need consultation along the way to make sure that we align ourselves of what's important in the world out there to promote international trade. If indeed we fail to adhere to international standards, we are causing most likely very difficult trade barriers that are making it difficult for us to export even to neighboring countries, as many of these countries are also now becoming part of the WTO. So yes, we have to be sharp in terms of what we do. All right, good. So that's why we talk about the Codex Alimentarius, so important in the world that we live in today, because many of the documents do refer to the Codex standards, and you will see as we talk about dairy, it is so critical that even if you talk about the SABS, when you talk about the International Standards Organization and also the African Organization for Standardization, the Codex becomes the norm. And there's a drive behind this where I think the development of international and the harmonization of these standards is something that the world is trying to accomplish over a short period of time to make sure that we're basically on par to assist with the world that we live in terms of international trade. So yes, the WTO and the Codex, well connected, and they are really working hard towards the harmonization. I don't say that this is always a good thing, because when you talk about regional standards, that is very important specifically for Africa, that we don't try to over-regulate in terms of adopting standards, but that you will leave in certain areas that uniqueness within the regions, because due to our cultural differences in Africa and the uniqueness of the dairy products, rather than just to simply try to harmonize and make things just simple. It's not that easy. The Codex in the International Dairy Federation. Now, this is very important because the International Dairy Federation is the representative body of which South Africa is a member, and we actively participate within all the IDF standing committees to make a difference on the international platform when it comes to matters of interest. Very important for us to share our scientific knowledge, because many of the Codex documents that will be up for discussions during the Codex committee meetings during the year, no matter the stage, there will be correspondence between South Africa as a Codex contact point, and then for that reason, we will liaise on the IDF level to get international input on the way that we think. And that will also be shared with the South African Codex contact point to make sure that there's a cross flow of information and give a true reflection of how the industries feel, the dairy industry, in respect of formulating Codex standards. So some of the last work that we've been working on the International Dairy Federation stuff is the some of the proposed draft guideline on the provision of food information for prepackaged foods to be offered via e-commerce. And that is a concern, because often on the internet you can buy a product which could be easily mislabeled, and by the time that you receive this food product, it is not what you've ordered, or it could be misleading in terms of the claims, whatever the case may be. So there's really some serious work that's going in from Codex side to make sure that we have a proper standard worldwide in terms of controlling e-commerce, in terms of the compliance of our legislation. Codex Committee on Food Labeling, specifically allergen labeling, is important. And then we look at all sorts of analytical methods, and specific one here that has been recently addressed is milk and milk products, the quantification of free fatty acids. Why is free fatty acids so important for us? Because it reflects on the quality, or let me rather say the hygiene within our product, specifically raw material, by the time that it reaches the factory environment for further processing. So important to be able to do the FFAs, because it reflects on hygiene and quality. The IDF position on Codex discussion paper on harmonized probiotic guidelines for the use of fruits, beverages and food supplements. Now in South Africa, we know that you cannot make health claims and probiotic claims on dairy products, specifically probiotic claims, because it's prohibited, being probiotic a medicine, maybe this uh, Schedule 1 or a Schedule 2 or a Schedule 0, but it does not fall under the Foodstuffs Act per se, but under the control of the Medicines Act. So very important to take note of that. And in terms of this discussion paper, we will have to see how can we optimize on the use of probiotic or probiotics in the dairy industry and overcome this hurdle without making these claims, because probiotics in the world that we live in has become truly an essential issue from a nutritional point of view. The next one is the comments on to the Codex Committee on Food Import and Export Inspection and Certification Systems regarding food fraud. Now, if you don't know by now, one of our biggest threats in the food industry is food fraud. Whether it's international or national, it's a major concern that products are being manufactured and labeled and absolutely misleading, and it's a major cause for food fraud. Yes, in the dairy industry, there are certain issues that we do look at, and that is from raw material to final product, and that's where the DSA is also very much involved in testing for certain of these targeted fraudulent activities. Discussion papers on harmonization of probiotic that I've addressed, and then the general standards for the use of dairy terms. Very important that we protect the use of dairy terms, specifically look at products that is plant-based that are so keen on using dairy terms, and both in terms of the Foodstuffs Act and the Agricultural Product Standards Act, there's specific clauses that say, or it reads that it's a misleading issue if you start making certain claims towards a product, even if it's an extent or expand this discussion a bit later on. So false misleading claims in terms of misuse of dairy terms, very important for us in this case. So there's the ISO standards, the International Non-Governmental Organization, and there you can see it's made up of national standards bodies, where South African Bureau of Standards is very much involved in the ISO activities. And you will find from time to time that there's an ISO standard that's being adopted by the SABS, and that standard then becomes a South African national standard. Whether you talk about analytical methods and it goes to the world of food safety management systems, it could then also be an ISO standard, but it's also a South African national standard as adopted. There's the African Organization for Standardization. So we have South Africa in the context of ISO, but then also we have the African Organization for Standardization, which also tries to harmonize trade on the African continent. Now, it's very difficult if you start writing 75 different standards for dairy products and it's not aligned with the ISO standards or Codex for that matter, specifically more to the Codex line, and the SABS is not involved in this process and ISO is not, because a lot of these activities that's taking place within the working groups of the African Organization for Standardization relates to work of the Codex and ISO. And then we have to make sure that our regulation is also considered, and we look at the possible alignment of these activities of ISO with our respective legislation when it comes to standardization. Now, in terms of risk analysis and legal compliance, I just want to reflect on it. Risk analysis is at the heart of the modern approaches and is rapidly emerging as a unifying discipline across all food sectors. And this is very important. We talk about risk analysis, and yes, there is an the InfoSan, for example, where there is bodies that are really looking after the food safety of international trade. InfoSan is a typical example, the European Food Safety Agency. There are many of these organizations, but just a simple example, look at what happened recently in terms of peanut butter in South Africa. We would have thought, and it's the same with listeria in the meat industry, that we had really things under control. So if you look at the sizes of these companies that are really involved and you look at the risk profiling of these products in terms of, let's say, aflatoxin and listeria, what safeguard the dairy industries to such an extent that we can think we can have a relaxed approach. So by God's grace, we haven't been affected, but I think we surely have to get our socks always pulled up and make sure that we have all our due diligence in place, and that we work within the government and the legal frameworks to ensure that whatever is necessary, that we can mitigate risk within our sectors. So when it comes to legal compliance, we have to make sure, and the measurement against the legal standards is that if there's something wrong, we have to implement corrective measures to the right level. Now, maybe you don't know about this. In terms of risk analysis, the government itself is very much binded to the idea of the Intergovernmental Relations Framework Act. In the past, it hasn't been that way to such an extent that it was visible, but now these days, you will find out before you can publish a regulation, there's lots of consultation taking place between national government structures, and that's the framework that should be there, so that there's interaction, intergovernmental relationships to which we can work and make sure that there are mechanisms in place to consult. And one of these are because of the fragmented legislation in South Africa. You know that you have the Department of Agriculture with all its departments or directorates, for example, the Department of Health, and then there's the NRCS under the DTI and so forth. But it makes things complicated if you start talking about legislation that goes across border. What happened recently is when you draft legislation for promulgation in South Africa, there should be engagement with the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation, the DME, to finalize the social economic impact assessments. In other words, if I write legislation, first it has to go through the SAIAS process to make sure that once that legislation is published, it does not have an effect, a socio-economic impact on the South African citizens of this country that is detrimental and that it will sort of cause harm. So all aspects should go then through this SAIAS arrangement to make sure that we can make sure that our legislation is easy to enforce and it's applicable for what it has been written to. In other words, it should fulfill its role within the constitution of our country. Now, just to come down to earth a bit, we've got Milk South Africa, which is the representative organization of the dairy industry, organized dairy industry, and it's got the MPO, the Milk Producers Organization, but also the secondary industry, which is the South African Milk Processors Organization. And the role of Milk SA, with its board of directors, need to report to the Minister of Agriculture, because there are levies published to make sure that we execute the 5 broadly described strategies that are mentioned there. One of them is the promotion of compliance of dairy products with legal requirements in respect of food safety, product composition, and metrology. This is very important, and what I'm trying to get to is that there is a responsibility from the organized dairy industry, as with any agricultural sector or food sector, to be responsible towards the industry, to the government and the consumer, that we are doing our utmost best not to just per se dealing with the issues of international trade, but to safeguard the products that we will export and that is locally consumed. So why I say that is specifically there's a regulation and standards project of Milk SA, which is also part of the makeup of the DSA. The project is managed by the DSA. And you can see whenever we contribute to legislation and standards, there is a step-by-step approach to make sure that there is proper national or stakeholder consultation. And often there's I need to call this something like the plumbing work that needs to take place before we can go to the industry to say, here's a draft, here's a concept document that we would like you to peruse or pay attention to. And then once we've got the idea of how you feel about this draft, we can start commenting on it and look at it from a legal point of view, whether this is the correct approach. In other words, that we don't deviate from the goal of the actual regulation or standard, what it's supposed to be. So lots of interaction between the stakeholders and the relevant department is applicable, whether it's agriculture or health or so. I'm not going to go into the details of that. It's quite a process. When you look at the Foodstuffs, Cosmetics and Disinfectants Act, for example, these are the documents that serve in many cases as our reference documents, where it clearly say, before we even go to the actual regulations, the Act forbids the sale of foodstuffs that may be detrimental to the or harmful to human health. So yes, you have the Consumer Commission that's working on certain issues. They operate under other legislation, but the Foodstuffs, Cosmetics and Disinfectants Act is the actual act that deals with the food safety related matters very specifically. There's endeavors to protect the consumer from exploitation, from false and misleading claims, and this is where the fraudulent products may also be then taken into consideration, but also attempts to provide the consumer with such information as is necessary to make informed choices according to food safety and health related individual needs and wishes. This is what the Act actually stipulates. So a bit of a drill down into, and you will soon find out, not even the regulation, but already in the Act, these issues are very pertinently addressed. The basic objectives of the Act further on, it's there to protect the consumer from exploitation, and attempts to provide the consumer with such information as is necessary to make informed choices. Why is this? So you will see now when we start talking about the front of pack nutritional information or product labeling, as we say, front of pack labeling in short, it's very important to understand whatever you see on an advert, on the TV or on your device, whether it's on a platform or it's in the newspaper, the regulations makes provision for that, and the Act, you will not mislead the consumer. And there's many examples of that that we can go into where the industries are really playing it on the fine side of the things to try to get a competitive edge in that respect. What is holding back the regulation 3337 in principle? There were lots and lots of comments, feedback given to the Department of Health by the closing date, and the closing date was on the 21st, if I'm not mistaken, of July last year. But the main thing here is to get over this thing of front of pack labeling. And to some industries, it's not a big concern, but to others, yes, indeed. We've been very concerned addressing this with the Department of Agriculture or Department of Health, that we do not disadvantage specifically dairy products, where a dairy product per se would not have the kind of sugar as carbonated sugar beverages, for example, or extremely high fat or high salt contents, for example. So it was very difficult for us to see how the regulation will deal with the matter of comparing dairy per se, milk, or yogurt for that matter, plain yogurt, and put it in the same basket as processed foods that may contain high sugar content. Now, at the same time, we do recognize that you do get sweetened dairy products, and for that reason, and perhaps certain cheeses that has got some high salt content, we have to really be careful not to discredit the nutritional value of dairy products in comparison to some other foods of which nutritional value is really, the product is deprived of good nutrition. So these discussions have been going on, and we've also submitted a very scientific document to the department, and I think we've succeeded in a way to clearly make our point of view clear to the department. And I'm glad to see that certain products of the dairy industry is then exempted from these specific clauses when it talks about the front of pack labeling and the warning signs in per se. So we're grateful for that. Another regulation that we've been recently working on is Regulation 1555, and not recently, we've been working since 2021 up 22, 23, is to really make sure that we've got a new regulation, because remember, our intention is, from a microbiological point of view, to have the dairy specifications excluded from the biological specifications for foodstuffs. In other words, because of the complexities of dairy, we've decided to have it separate in our regulation, and we've been working on it for quite some time. We've had specialists involved here like Professor Lucia Annelich, and we very much appreciate the participation in the work that we've done so far. So yes, we've got a research and development project also running to determine the significance of E. coli and coliforms as indicator organisms of hygiene and food safety in milk in South Africa, with the intention of updating specifications as set out in Regulation 1555. That work is in a very advanced stage to make a contribution to the draft that we will obviously put forward to industry shortly once it's finished. Yes, so that's the work under the Foodstuffs, Cosmetics and Disinfectants Act. The Department of Health, very interesting that I would like to notice for you that don't know the lactose peroxidase system. Many years ago already it has been used in dairy industry, not to make bad milk better, but really to help with good quality milk through the lactose peroxidase system, to preserve the milk, if I can use this in inverted commas, or to suppress the growth of bacteria in the milk until it reaches the factory environment. In South Africa, with all the electricity, the problems that we have and the long distances the milk have to travel, we are quite certain that by using the lactose peroxidase system, for which there is no residual effect in the milk per se, because it's part of the ingredients list of your milk, the true meaning there is to try to suppress the growth of bacteria until it gets to the factory environment and ensure a better yield and a longer shelf life of dairy. Looking at all the variables that is really giving us a bit of a problem. So the lactose peroxidase system is well recognized in the world for many years. It's accepted by the World Health Organization. There's guidelines on it, and for that same reason, we would like to see possibly help our industry in better quality rather than compromise in different ways. So there you can see Section 6 of the APS Act. Prohibition of false and misleading descriptions for products. No person shall use any name, word, expression, and then it carries on and on in a manner that conveys, it creates, or is likely to convey or create false or misleading impressions. Now, for the general public, it's sometimes not clear, but I think for law enforcement bodies or well-informed consumers, often you pick up a product and you will say, but what do I read here? Is this misleading? And I can tell you, for most of the time, trust your senses. You most likely will read something that has reason to raise concern within you. But then at the same time, if you have doubt, you can make contact with the authorities, or you can also make contact with the DSA for that matter. And we will try our best to bring clarity as soon as possible with regards to that. So just take note of that. These are two examples where I just want to, and I'm not trying to implicate now, but it's just merely an example. These were products that, and the one on the right is still on the shelf. Talking about the left, we have noted over a long period of time that the dairy snack in our country has been causing a lot of havoc in terms of confusion. And there you can see on this old label on the left, where it looks very familiar. It looks like a yogurt. And then right at the bottom, you see yogurt-based dairy snack. Now, in between, the legislation has changed, and with all credit to the companies, they've all changed the legislation. But by doing that, would you consider that to be misleading? Because the consumer will see a very familiar label, very familiar, Even now, today, you will perceive it to be a yogurt because the tub looks the same, the pictorial presentations look the same as yogurt, but right at the bottom, in the past it said yogurt-based dairy snack. So for that reason, I think that's where the law is really clear on the issue. I think you may not mislead the consumer by pictorial presentations like that. On the right-hand side, you look at plant butter, which has been a continuous issue, and even now it's closely monitored, where this company then still sells a product called plant butter. There's no provision in the law for a product called plant butter, not in the regulations governing fats and oils, and also not in the dairy regulations. But simply by using this, a scapegoat was trying to be found by put the trademark behind plant butter. That was not a registered trademark until today. It's not. But there's a sign there of trademark, a process of trademark registration. So please be aware of that it is not compliant in terms of its name. It is confusing. And if you're part of a law enforcement body, please pay attention to these small details, because for the consumer, the word butter, that's larger than any of the other words there, tells you that there's an element of dairy in this product, and there is absolutely zero. So we've taken up this whole process with the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Agriculture, Food Safety Quality Assurance, and Executive Office settled this issue with the manufacturer, granting them a dispensation to get rid of this product from the retail, and their dispensation will be, I think, expiring in somewhere in October, if I'm not mistaken, this year. So this is just a very good example to that effect. Big concern for us, when you look at these products that are absolutely plant-based, and the concerns that there are about the use of terminology with rice milk, the term milk, soy milk, this we will address now in terms of the regulation 1510 that will soon be going out as a draft. So please pay attention. Our concerns are these products are on the shelf, but there are no regulations governing the composition of these products. So much of a problem. Then we have this very hot topic about the RBST free as an example. There's been discussions about the issue of how misleading is this to the consumer. I don't want to go too deep into this, but there is correspondence flowing between industry and the Department of Agriculture of how can you justify the claim based on certain conditions of which there is no legal norm to measure against the level of or the detection. In other words, there may be international methods of analytical value, but there's no standard or norm in this country that can tell you I've tested the product and it's not it's acceptable or not, whereby there's nothing wrong with this product in terms of RBST. RBST is used in the animals under controlled conditions, and then also say it's not an animal health problem, it's not a human health problem according to scientific documents that we perceive is credible. So what is it that drives a company to make this decision about RBST free? Most likely to say that it's what my consumer want, but that's fine, provided it is well regulated in the country where you find this kind of labeling, and we do find it not very well covered in terms of measuring to know, and also by means of a commercial analytical method. So yes, there are lots of talk, but I think the one that is standing out for me, which is really important, is the regulation 1510 that deals with the dairy and imitation dairy products under the Agricultural Product Standards Act. So there you can see already since 2022, we've been working on this document, and in 2023, we've submitted our document to the Department of Agriculture, or DALRAD, for that matter, and then asked them to comment on the proposed amendments to this regulation. We've had various technical workshops through the technical work group of Milk SA. We've consulted on more than 2 occasions with industry. So what we've put towards the department is something that we can say has been subjected to a very clear process of transparency. I've got some good news for those that's really involved in this process, that the minister, or not the minister, the Department of DARA itself, Food Safety Quality Assurance Directorate, has made contact with us, and then on the 6th of this month, March, you as an industry stakeholder will be able to comment on this document. In other words, there will be interaction between the department and stakeholders to hear what the department in fact is saying about this proposed amendments. And then on the 7th, following what has been aspiring on that day, on the 7th, there will be another meeting by the Milk SA Technical Work Group to discuss this matter further. And then, only then, there will be a document circulated by the department for public perusal and inputs. So there's quite some transparency in this process, but please take note that this regulation is really now, the dynamics have kicked in and we're on our roll. Yes, we still have the agricultural products or the product standards amendment bill. This has been really going on, I think, since 2015, where the bill seeks to amend the Agricultural Product Standards Act to insert definitions and substitute others, to provide for the auditing of a product for management control systems, make provision for setting of tariffs for the assignees on a cost recovery basis. Please take note of that. It's very important. Make further provisions for the minister to make regulations pertaining to the audit and management control systems and to provide for matters connected thereof. So in other words, there are products that are sold, let's say, for example, free range, organic, and the problem is in the current legislation, I just use those as examples. There's no provision in the law for the actual inspectors, or whether there's an assignee to frequent these facilities and then do an audit. So that shortfalls have been addressed by this Amendment Act, to change the definitions and then make provision for the necessary legal dispensation so that facilities may be audited to that effect to make sure there's no misleading taking place. Very important. And the good part is that make provision for the setting of tariffs by assignees on a cost recovery basis. Very important in terms of oversight by the government over the functions of assignees where there are assignees in place. So this is very important to us. We know that there's a process, and as far as we know, that this bill is up for signing by the minister, and hopefully that will take place in the near distance. The Department of Agriculture, or DARA for that aspect, please take note the regulations relating to the protection of geographical indications. This regulation has been published, not so directly relevant to the organized dairy industry, but now you can see that names like rooibos and Karoo lamb and all these products, and if necessary in the future, dairy comes to the table. South African products that will carry a GI, a geographical indication, will then be protected by means of this regulation that's now already published. Just in short, please take note that the work that's being done in the context of this regulation is done by the PPECB, the Perishable Product Export Control Board, specifically referring to export of these products. So it's not something that will be addressed by any assignee. Then we talk about the DARA and the veterinary public health. And this is very, very important, as the fact that we've been since 2020 could not export products to the EU and to other countries outside the SADC countries of South Africa and SACU and so forth. The national chemical residue monitoring program of the dairy industry has become totally non-existent. So for a very, very long period of time, nearly 23 years, we haven't had a national chemical residue monitoring program. The EU has frequented South Africa on more than one occasion to ask that they make available their assistance to help us to put together a residue monitoring program that will enable South Africa to export to the EU. Why are these things so important? Obviously, from a food safety point of view, we want to know whether our products, whether it's dairy or meat, or what the case may be, whether it complies with our national and international legislation in terms of residues, chemical residues, whether it's herbicides, pesticides, and so forth, antibiotics. And for that reason, we have to move forward. And the other rationale is other countries in Africa have already taken up this view that it's better to comply with the EU system from the start, which then will cover their national chemical residue. In other words, it's not only for export, but for local production and consumption. That these products must be monitored, and where necessary, there must be intervention from the state. So this is really something of extreme high priority, and this is making good progress. And hopefully we will see a change in our national legislation relating to the residues in foods, so that we can make sure we are on par with what's happening out there in the world. Underlying issues here, there are very many of these veterinary procedural notices. And to really be on par, the department is also, DALRAD is busy with a review of the veterinary procedural notices to make sure that when a product is exported from South Africa, that everything from the farm to the factory into the hands of the exporter or the consumer will comply to the necessary requirements. It's not that these VPNs are not in existence, they just need to be updated. I want to quickly mention the matters relating to the Border Management Authority Act that you know has become into existence. And on that BMA, if I can just abbreviate that, is health specialists, plant inspectorate, state veterinary inspectorate, the national regulator for compulsory specifications, and the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. Recent feedback that we got from the Port Health in Port Elizabeth, for example, is that they still struggle with the resources, and it's a process. So hopefully we will be better off in due course with this whole. It's a huge exercise that has been put into place, and that the country itself will benefit from that. At this moment in time, our ports of entry really is not on par. If you look at the queues of vehicles that's standing. Increase in health promotion levies. For those of you that is dealing with this issue, I can say that the health promotion levy through this the Tax Act, SARS Act, on sugar stood over for consultation till 1 April 2023. And it was stated there will be no increase in the levy for the 2023-24 and 24-25 financial years. So I can think that maybe in the next year, in 25-6, there could things be changed. And ladies and gentlemen, in terms of if you need access to the legislation that I'm referring to, or other legislation, or the ISO standards for that matter, or codex, please consult our website for more information. And when it comes to national legislation, also look on the Food Focus website, where it is very easy to gain access to a regulation per se. Please note that we do update these combined lists from time to time. So if you do have a query, you're most welcome to make contact with us. That is my story. I hope you've learned something this morning and that it adds value. So I'm handing over to you, Adele. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yompi. Once again, so much detail and an excellent way of putting it out there. And the realization, looking at all those slides, and all the detail in terms of the regulations and standards and guidelines just shows that being in the food industry, you nearly need to be a lawyer as well to make sure that you understand all of these things. And thank you very much for that layout. We don't have a lot of questions. We've actually just got 3 questions thus far. So please, if there's more questions, please put them in the question section right now. But Yompi, one of the questions were obviously the slides, if you will make the slides available with the presentation. Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
So as soon before the end of the week, we will have the recording as well as the slides available then on Food Focus website, as well as on the Dairy Standard Agency's website. So the next question was, and this was very specific, it was around would testing for Listeria every 3 months be considered good practice, or is there a regulated test frequency? So I don't know how you want to answer that one.
I can. First of all, if you want to talk about Listeria, you're most welcome to frequent our website. There's a guideline dealing with pathogen control, a very helpful instrument that can help members of the dairy industry how to approach testing for Listeria. And now that the hysteria has calmed down a bit, I think the important thing is that Listeria is an environmental pathogen. And when you test and you find Listeria species, a species in your facility, you have to take the next step. You have to perhaps look at that pathogen control guideline that we've given you to properly interpret what you should be doing. Because Listeria species, you will always find maybe in the cooling systems, in the drains, and wherever. So if you do environmental sampling for that reason, you do pick them up. Really, just don't go frantic. I think sit down with your food safety team, your asset team, and then take it from there. Get a very rational approach on how you would deal with this issue. Obviously, when you find this Listeria in your foodstuff as a final, ready-to-consume product, you know what to do. Go follow the recall procedure and be very transparent in the problem that you have. But I think it's then over to really to do a drill down, and if necessary, if it looks like big trouble, you have to do genomic sequencing on that, and that's the next level. But you have to understand that the better your food safety management system, the more you can rely on your food safety management system. In other words, there's ethics in the system, there's proper control, then the likelihood is there that you will be very easy and quick in a position to eliminate whatever the cause may be of that. But if you know you have a problem, sorry Adele, don't sit on it too long, be proactive, try to quickly as possible resolve the issue, and don't be shy to get help, get the right help. Yeah. Ask for help.
I think the challenge always is that people feel that they don't want to share or approach people because what will they say if they hear that that's the case. But I think when it comes to these type of things, we need to reach out to people that will be able to assist and help, to give you a proper solution.
Yeah.
I did also, Ian, I did put the link to that guideline that Yompi is referring to.
Yeah.
I did put it in the chat for Ian, so I'm sure of it that would guide him further. And then it was the very important question around R1510, but I think you've mentioned the 2 important dates of the 4th and the 7th of March. And then you said that after the 7th of March, it will be made available to public for comment.
Yes,
so will it still happen in March?
Yes, Adele, what will happen is once we've consulted with DALRA, with the Food Safety Quality Assurance, we will have a good idea. After the 7th, we will also have a good idea with the extent of the issues that might be contentious and what we need to talk about and how much homework we have to go take it back to the department to address. So once that has been done, and obviously it's very important to note if there are more than one set of comments on a specific issue, we will publish both. In other words, we will not take side. The Milk SA technical work group has got no decision powers over taking one that they might favor. We can't work with opinions, we work with science, and if there's two opinions on a matter, both go in for consideration by the department and obviously for consideration by the industry in the next round. So
Yeah.
please be at ease with that one.
Yeah, definitely. And I see that there's people that's asking for your contact details, Yompi. So can you maybe just say your email address that
Yes,
people can reach you?
It's my name is very difficult to spell. No, it's so simple. People make mistakes on this one. So it's just Jompie, Jompie at Dairy Standard, DAIRY standard.co.za. Or if it's a matter of urgency, you're welcome to phone me on the landline or at the office 012-665 4250 or on the email. Yeah, but I think rather email me. It just gives me time to digest.
Definitely, email is always better because then at least you have a trail. So,
Yeah.
people are saying thank you so much in terms of your presentation and providing clarity. I want to thank the audience and everybody else. It seems like we don't have any further questions. So, I would like to say thank you to the delegates that attended. And as soon as the webinar closes, there's a short survey. It's 4 questions. It's not a lot of questions. But this helps the DSA to understand what other topics you are interested in, to also assist and make sure that you get your answers that you are looking for. So please answer the survey. I would really appreciate that. Then the webinar have been recorded, and the recording will be available on foodfocus.co.za as well as on the dairystandard.co.za. And the presentation will be a PDF that's downloadable with the recording. Then it's to the point where I want to say thank you very much for your time. I know it's always difficult taking time out of a busy schedule, but I really hope that you have enjoyed this. I also want to make you aware that you will receive an attendance certificate tomorrow in your inbox. Please note, this is a once-off certificate that is generated by the GoToWebinar platform. It does not contain, or there's no CPD points linked to it, as the presentation, Yompi and them didn't take it to the Health Professions Council to get CPD points related to the presentation. So please note, it's a once off, and the system utilizes your name and surname that you used to register to attend today. So please make sure that you download it, because unfortunately it's not possible for me to reissue you with a certificate. Then, as you heard, Yompi mentioned a lot of important dates in terms of when R1510 will be available for comments. So please make sure that you sign up to our newsletter and also follow us on our social media platforms. In that way, you will be we will keep you up to date in terms of any actions or activities happening in the industry. Then I would like to ask you to note in your diary so long, the next webinar is for the DSAs on the 20th of March, and Dr. Mark Chimes will be talking about understanding lameness in dairy cattle. So it's a very technical type of presentation, but I think interesting, and also to assist people within the industry with this problem if they may have it. So with that, I want to say thank you. Thank you, Yompi, and may you all have a blessed day. And until I see you in March, keep well.